Say these four words twice tonight, then watch the next 72 hours. Neville Goddard taught that the words you speak quietly in the moments before sleep become the architects of your next 72 hours, and tonight you are going to prove this to yourself with your own two ears and your own unfolding life. The premise for tonight comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 11, verse 24, where it is written, "What things soever ye desire, when ye pray, believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them." Mark did not sit down to write a history book. Mark sat down to write the operating instructions of your own imagination. The desire is the wish rising in you even now. The prayer is the inner conversation you carry through your day. The believing is the feeling of the wish already fulfilled, and the having is simply the state you come to occupy so naturally that you forget you ever doubted it. This is not a promise about someday. This is a description of how your own consciousness has always worked, whether you knew it or not. I am rich now. I am the one who lives in the end. Imagination creates my reality. Say it with me again. I am rich now. I am the one who lives in the end. Imagination creates my reality. Before we go further, tell me you are ready to claim it. Type the two words "I am rich" in the comments below right now. Let that be your first small act of assumption tonight. And if you would like tomorrow's teaching to find you, the moment you open your eyes, simply subscribe, so that this quiet work keeps reaching you night after night. The first key is this. The words "I am" are the name of God living inside you. Whenever you say "I am rich now," you are not describing a bank balance. You are invoking the very power that once said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Neville Goddard taught that "I am" is the awareness of being itself, the one unchanging presence behind every state you have ever passed through. Poverty is a state. Sickness is a state. Lack is a state. But you, the "I am," are never any of these. You only visit them the way a man visits a room and then leaves it. Think of a man standing in a small, crowded kitchen late at night, staring at a stack of unpaid bills spread across the table. He feels the weight of them pressing on his chest, and in that heaviness, he quietly forgets that he is not the debt. He is the one looking at the debt. The debt is only a room he is currently standing in. The moment he remembers this, everything changes. So when you speak these four words tonight, you are not petitioning some distant heaven. You are addressing the only power there has ever been, and that power lives behind your own breath right now. Say the words slowly. Feel the quiet authority in them. Feel the small private smile of someone who already knows a secret nobody else has been told yet. That smile is not vanity. That smile is evidence. It is the only evidence imagination has ever required of anyone. You do not need the outer world to agree with you yet. You only need to remember who is speaking. So speak this decree with me. I am the power that speaks, and it is done. I am the power that speaks, and it is done. The second key is this. Feeling is the secret, and it always has been. You can say, "I am rich now," with a flat voice and a doubting heart, and nothing will move. Or you can say the very same four words while feeling the relief of a burden already lifted. And the whole of consciousness rearranges itself around that feeling. Neville Goddard taught that it is not the words themselves that carry power. It is the state of consciousness the words are spoken from. Words are only the outer garment. Feeling is the living body underneath. Picture a man standing at his mailbox every single day, waiting for a check he has been promised. He can stand there reciting the words "it has arrived," in a tight and anxious voice, checking his watch, glancing down the street, and the words will do nothing for him, because underneath them he still feels the ache of lack. But now picture that same man, having decided instead to feel, right there at the mailbox, the same loose-shouldered ease he would feel if the check were already resting in his hand, the same unhurried breath, the same quiet smile of a matter already settled. That feeling is what moves through his whole day. into how he speaks to his family, into how he carries himself at work, into the very posture the world then meets and answers. This is the difference between reciting and assuming. A man who says, "I am confident," while his knees knock and his voice shakes, will still perform like a frightened man, because his body is only obeying the feeling, not the sentence. But a woman who feels, quietly and privately, the ease of already having what she wants, begins to move through her rooms like someone who already has it, even before a single outer thing has changed. So tonight, when you say, "I am rich now," do not merely recite it the way you might recite an address. Feel it. Feel the way your shoulders drop when a worry has genuinely passed. Feel the way your breathing slows when a bill has actually been paid in full. Feel the small private satisfaction of a secret already closed and resolved. Borrow that feeling now. Wear it like a coat before you have ever stepped outside into the weather it was made for. This is what Neville meant when he said, "Imagination is God," not simply the pictures you see behind closed eyes, but the feeling that gives those pictures flesh and blood and breath. A picture without feeling is only a wish standing at the door. A picture wrapped in feeling is a fact already forming in the dark. So tonight, let the feeling come first, and let the four words simply be its natural sound. So speak this decree with me. I feel it real now, and feeling is the deed. I feel it real now, and feeling is the deed. The third key is this: everyone you meet, every circumstance you encounter, every reaction the world gives back to you, is you, pushed out. Neville Goddard taught that the outer world is nothing but a mirror, held up to the assumptions you hold about yourself in the privacy of your own mind. Not a mirror of glass and silver, but a living mirror made of people, of circumstances, of timing, of tone, and it can only ever show you a reflection of the self you have secretly decided you are. The world has no imagination of its own. It can only borrow yours, and hand back to you the very state you have been quietly rehearsing within. Consider a woman who wakes each morning already bracing for a difficult day. She checks her phone expecting bad news. She walks into her workplace already anticipating tension, and by mid-morning, the tension has somehow found her. A sharp email, a curt reply, a delay that costs her the whole afternoon. She will say the day was against her, but Neville would say the day was simply her. Arranged in time and circumstance, she supplied the atmosphere before she ever left her bed, and the mirror, being faithful, could only comply. Now imagine that same woman resting instead in the quiet assumption that people are kind to her, that things move smoothly for her. Watch how the very same office begins to soften around her. The room did not change, she changed, and the room, faithful mirror that it is, could only follow. Now picture an ordinary grocery store. A man stands in line, tired, and the cashier seems short with him, barely looking up. The old habit of mine says people are rude. This is simply how the world treats me. But Neville would ask him to pause and ask instead, what have I been assuming about how I am met? If he is honest, he may find he walked in already bracing to be overlooked. The cashier has only worn, for a moment, the mask his own assumption handed her. And if he had walked in feeling himself warmly received, he might have found her glancing up, offering a small, unexpected smile. The same woman, the same counter, but a different mirror, because he brought a different self to stand before it. This is the deeper meaning behind Neville's teaching, that the whole world is your own imagination, pushed outward and objectified. It means the stranger who seems to judge you is only reflecting a judgment you have not yet released. The door that seems shut is only reflecting a door you have not yet opened within. None of it is accident. It is the faithful echo of a self-concept you have not yet questioned. And when you say, "I am rich now," and feel it settle as fact, you are quietly retuning the entire mirror that surrounds you. So tonight, as you carry these four words toward sleep, understand that every person you meet tomorrow is simply standing ready, like glass waiting for light, to to reflect back whatever state you have decided, in the stillness of your own assumption, to be true of you. So speak this decree with me. I meet only my own reflection wherever I go. I meet only my own reflection wherever I go. The fourth key is this. You must learn to live in the end, not simply to wish for the end. Neville Goddard taught that the end is the fulfillment of the desire, already complete, already settled, and that your task is not to strive toward it, but to think from it, to live from it, as though it were already the settled fact of your life. Most people pray from lack. They say, I hope I become rich. And in doing so, they only deepen the state of not having, because hope and someday keep the fulfillment forever just out of reach. But to live in the end is to drop the hoping and simply assume the wish is already fulfilled. To stand, in feeling, on the other side of the very gap you have been staring across for so long. Picture a man at his kitchen table with the bills spread out before him. He feels his stomach tighten and says, I hope things get better soon. Notice what he has done. He has planted his attention firmly in the middle of lack. Now imagine a different man, same table, same numbers, but this man has learned to live in the end. He looks at the very same figures and exhales. Because in his imagination, the matter is already settled. He does not deny the shortage on the paper. He simply refuses to let that paper be the final authority on what is true of him. He sees the account replenished. He feels the same ease he would feel if the solution had already arrived that morning. The numbers have not changed, but the man has changed, and it is the man, not the numbers, who determines what happens next. Neville often returned to the picture of a woman expecting an important letter. She does not spend her days lamenting its absence. If she truly expects it, she checks the mailbox with quiet confidence rather than anxious dread. She has already arranged her plans around its arrival. She speaks of it as a coming certainty rather than a distant hope. This is the difference between wanting and truly living in the end. Wanting keeps its eyes on the empty mailbox. Living in the end keeps its eyes on the letter already read. When you say, I am rich now, do not add tomorrow to it in your heart. The moment you whisper, but of course not yet, you have quietly canceled your own assumption before it took root. Feel it as a completed fact this very night. Walk through your rooms as the one who already has abundance. Let your posture forget the old worry, the way a man forgiven a great debt forgets. Without even trying, to walk with his shoulders hunched. This is not pretending, and the distinction matters more than almost anything else in this practice. Neville separated pretending, which knows itself false even as it performs, from assuming, which becomes true because you have stopped doubting it. A child pretending to be a pirate still knows school begins Monday, but the one who assumes has closed the back door through which doubt used to slip. Two people can speak the very same sentence, I am rich now, and one is merely performing a phrase, while the other is quietly relocating the whole of their consciousness. Only the second is doing the work that changes anything. Think again of that kitchen table. And a third man who says the words out loud hoping the saying alone is magic, but still glances nervously at the bills the next second. Still feels his stomach tighten the moment the words are finished. He has confused vocabulary with conviction. Living in the end asks more than a sentence. It asks that you take up residence there, that you furnish its rooms with feeling, until they feel more familiar than the halls of lack you have lived in so long. So tonight, before you speak your 4 words, first decide firmly what the end looks like for you. Do not leave it vague. Vagueness is the enemy of every assumption. See the version of your life where the rent is paid without a second thought, where the account is full and untroubled, where the right opportunity has arrived exactly on time. Step into that end mentally. Walk its rooms the way you might walk through a house you are considering buying. Feel the calm in your chest, the ease in your voice as you speak of ordinary things, and only then speak the 4 words, so they rise from within the end, rather than from a window looking in at a life you have not yet dared to enter. This, Neville taught again and again, is the whole difference between the many who pray and the few who receive. Both may use identical language, both may kneel in the identical posture, but only one of them has actually gone and lived, in feeling, inside the answer. So speak this decree with me: I live already in the end I have chosen. I live already in the end I have chosen. The fifth key is this: there is a particular hour when the four words carry the greatest weight, and that is the hour just before sleep, the drowsy threshold, where the reasoning mind loosens its grip and the deeper imagination lies open and receptive. Neville Goddard called this the state akin to sleep, and he taught it as the most fertile ground for planting any assumption. In ordinary waking hours, the mind argues, it questions, it points at the empty wallet or the unanswered message, and insists that the assumption is false. But in that soft in-between state, right at the border of sleep, the critical faculty grows quiet, like a watchman finally nodding off at his post, and whatever you feel to be true in that drowsy hush sinks down into the deeper mind almost unopposed. Think for a moment of a man lying in bed after a long and ordinary day, his mind still cluttered with the small argument he had at work, the errand he forgot to run, the number on the bill he glimpsed on the counter. If he simply drifts off thinking of these things, he is, without even realizing it, planting those very things as the seed for tomorrow. But suppose instead this same man, in the last waking minutes, lets his body go heavy and loose the way it does in the final minutes before rest, lets his breathing slow, and quietly within himself whispers, I am rich now. He is not adding one more worried thought to the pile of the day. He is reaching underneath the pile entirely, to the soft receptive ground where the day's noise no longer has authority. This is the difference between a thought spoken in the daylight of reason and a thought spoken in the dusk where reason has laid down its sword. Now picture an ordinary household. A woman finishing the dishes, checking the locks, turning off the lamps one by one. And by the time she reaches her bed, her body already knows the pattern. The shoulders drop, the jaw unclenches, the eyelids grow heavy almost on their own. She has walked this path to sleep 1,000 times before, without ever once considering that this very drowsiness is a doorway. And yet Neville taught that this nightly drowsiness is nothing less than the entrance to the workshop where all true change is fashioned. She need not add anything strange or difficult to her evening. She need only, in that last soft moment before the light goes out entirely in her mind, let a single feeling rise and stay there, the feeling of the wish already fulfilled. And this feeling, entering exactly where her guard has already fallen, sinks below the surface the way a stone sinks through still water rather than skipping across it. Neville often described this drowsy state as a kind of controlled surrender, not the unconsciousness of ordinary sleep, and not the full alertness of noon, but a narrow and precious threshold in between, where you are relaxed enough that the arguing mind has grown still, and yet aware enough to direct, gently, what you feel. He compared it to the hush, just after a great argument has finally exhausted itself. When the room grows quiet, and whatever is said in that quiet is heard clearly by everyone present, so it is with your own mind. Say your 4 words too early, while the noise of the day still argues, and they must fight for space, but say them in this hush, and they are received the way a whispered word is received in a still room, completely, without resistance, without dispute. Consider how differently a single sentence lands, depending on the hour it is spoken. Shout a request into a crowded marketplace at noon, and it is lost among 100 other voices, all competing, all certain of their own importance. But whisper that same request into a quiet room at midnight, and it is the only sound there is. It is heard entirely. It is remembered. Your own mind is no different. During the busy hours of the day, your assumption must compete with the traffic report, the argument with a coworker, the ache in your back, the long list of small demands pulling your attention in every direction. But in the hush before sleep, All of that traffic has finally gone home for the night, and your four words are the only voice left standing in the room. This is why you are asked to say them twice, slowly, deliberately, as you lie in the dark preparing for sleep. Let your body soften into the bed. Let your limbs grow heavy the way they do when sleep is truly near. And in that soft and drowsy hush, whisper, "I am rich now." Feel the words settle into you the way a stone settles slowly to the bottom of still water, not thrown in with force, but simply released, allowed to sink at its own unhurried pace. Then again, "I am rich now," and let sleep simply take you from there. Do not analyze it, do not check whether you believe it. Do not lie awake testing the feeling against the evidence of the day. This is precisely the mistake so many make. They whisper the words, and then immediately begin arguing with themselves about whether the words are true, turning the lamp of reason back on the very moment they had only just switched it off. And in doing so, they drag the daylight mind right back into the room they had only just quieted. Imagine a man who plants his four words beautifully, softly, with real feeling, and then, 3 minutes later, rolls over and begins mentally rehearsing the very bill he was trying to release. He has, without noticing, unplanted what he only just planted. Instead, simply hand the feeling over to sleep the way you might hand a letter to a trusted messenger late in the evening. You do not stand over the messenger, demanding to know exactly how the letter will be delivered. You simply trust that it will reach its destination, and you turn and go to your rest. Neville often said that the thought you fall asleep on tends to be the thought you awaken to unfold. Consider how naturally this already shows itself in ordinary life. A person who falls asleep anxious about a meeting often wakes already rehearsing the anxiety before their eyes are even fully open. The worry seems to be waiting for them right there on the pillow, while a person who falls asleep with a settled and grateful heart often wakes carrying that same quiet ease into the new morning, without knowing quite why, as though something gentle had been left running all night long on their behalf. This is not accident. This is the deeper mind faithfully continuing the very note it was given the moment consciousness was released into rest. The last note of the evening becomes the first note of the morning. So if this is already how your mind works, whether you direct it or not, why not choose, deliberately, which note it will be tonight? Think of it this way. Every night, you already hand your mind over to something. Most nights, it is handed over unconsciously, to whatever scraps of worry or replayed conversation happen to be loudest at that hour. But tonight, you are simply choosing, on purpose, what will occupy that final unguarded moment. You are not doing anything unnatural. You are only finally taking the wheel of a car that has been driving itself for years. So tonight, let the last thought before sleep be the assumption fulfilled, and let sleep carry it, unquestioned, into the deeper places where all true change is made. Feel the words not as a hope reaching forward into an uncertain tomorrow, but as a fact quietly closing the door on today, and let that closed door be the last thing your mind touches before it lets go entirely. So speak this decree with me. I fall asleep as the one who has it. I fall asleep as the one who has it. The sixth key is this. Persistence is what turns an assumption into a fact. And this is why you are told to watch the next 72 hours rather than the next 72 minutes. Neville Goddard taught that an assumption, though false to the senses in the moment it is made, will harden into fact if only it is not abandoned too soon. And this single teaching alone has made or unmade every serious student who has tried this discipline, because the temptation is never to doubt the method. The temptation is simply to grow impatient with the silence that follows the planting. Think of a farmer who plants a seed in the evening. He does not dig it up the next morning to check whether it has grown. He understands the seed works quietly beneath the surface, unseen, while the visible world above shows nothing at all. And it is precisely during those unseen days that the true work is happening. Now think of a woman who plants tomato seeds in a small clay pot on her windowsill, and because she loves them, she cannot help herself. Each morning, she pushes her finger into the soil just to see if anything has changed, and each time she disturbs the tender roots trying to form beneath the surface. After a week, nothing has grown, not because the seed was faulty, but because her own anxious checking kept interrupting the very process she was hoping to encourage. This is precisely what happens when you say your 4 words tonight, and then spend the next day checking your bank balance, rehearsing your doubts to a friend, or searching your circumstances for early proof. You are pushing your finger down into soil that only asks to be left undisturbed. Consider also a man who applies for a position he deeply wants, and that evening he assumes the ease of already having received it. He feels the relief settle in his chest. He sleeps well, but by the next morning he is already refreshing his messages every few minutes, already asking his wife whether she thinks he will hear back soon, already rehearsing all the reasons he might not be chosen. He planted a seed of richness the night before, and then spent the daylight hours digging a small trench of doubt right alongside it. And doubt, tended daily, grows just as faithfully as conviction does. So the two compete, and the field yields nothing clean. Persistence is not only about waiting, it is about refusing to plant a second, contradicting seed once the first one has been laid down. So it is with your 4 words. You plant them tonight, and for a day, perhaps 2, the outer evidence may show no change whatsoever. This is not failure. This is the seed working in the dark soil of your deeper mind, exactly as it must. The number 72 carries an old and familiar rhythm. The rhythm of 3 days, the very rhythm of a tomb sealed shut and a stone rolled across it. And for 3 days nothing outward moved. The world saw only stillness, only apparent defeat. And yet within that very stillness, the greatest reversal in Scripture was already quietly underway. Neville read this not as ancient history, but as the pattern of your own consciousness. The old fact, the old lack, must lie still in the tomb of your assumption for a season before it rises transformed. And if you go looking too soon, rolling the stone back with your own anxious hands, you interrupt the very transformation you are waiting for. So when you say your 4 words tonight, you are laying a fact into the darkness of your own deeper mind. And for the next 3 days you are simply asked not to roll the stone back to check on it. Do not probe your bank account searching for proof. Do not interrogate your circumstances before the appointed hour. Do not announce your assumption to doubting ears, only to have it questioned back into uncertainty. Guard it the way a mother guards a newborn sleeping in a quiet room, protecting it not because it is fragile, but because it is precious, and because disturbance at the wrong moment can undo what patience alone was meant to finish. Neville reminded his listeners that the man who says "I have it," and then spends his waking hours anxiously wondering whether he really has it, has not yet planted anything at all. He has only planted doubt disguised as hope. True persistence is quieter than that. It does not check. It does not argue. It simply continues, gently, to feel the wish fulfilled each time the old thought of lack tries to rise and reclaim its place. And this returning, again and again, without frustration, is itself the whole of the discipline. Some imagine persistence means gritting the teeth and forcing a feeling that is not there, but Neville taught something far gentler. Persistence is simply the quiet habit of returning to the assumption the way your eyes return, without effort, to a familiar face across a room. You do not strain to find that face. You simply know where to look. And after enough evenings of practice, feeling the wish fulfilled becomes exactly that natural. Think once more of the woman and her tomato seeds. Imagine that instead of digging each morning, she simply waters the soil gently and walks away, trusting the sun and the dark earth to do what sun and dark earth have always done. She does not need to understand the exact chemistry of the root beneath the surface. She only needs to leave it undisturbed long enough for its own nature to complete itself. Your assumption asks the very same trust of you. So trust the darkness the way the farmer trusts the soil, and let the 72 hours do what 72 hours have always done for the one who does not dig up what has been planted. So speak this decree with me. I plant this word and let it rise unseen. I plant this word and let it rise unseen. The seventh key is this. If during these 72 hours the day brings you evidence that seems to contradict your assumption, you are not without recourse. Neville Goddard taught the practice of revision, which simply means that before you close your eyes each night, you look back over the day exactly as it was lived, and wherever it disagreed with the state you have assumed, you rewrite it in imagination as it should have gone. This is not pretending the bill never arrived. It is not lying about a stranger's tone. It is not erasing a single outer fact. It is refusing to let the outer world hold the pen that writes your inner story. Because the day as lived is only a rough draft, and every rough draft is meant to be rewritten by the very hand that first set it down. Think of a woman driving home. A coworker dismissed her idea sharply in front of the room, and she carries the sting all evening. If she does nothing, the scene simply loops, deepening the wound. But that night, before sleep, she calls the scene back as its author. Not to relive it, but to rewrite it. She sees his face soften, hears him say her idea was the strongest one presented, feels the warmth of being respected rather than dismissed, and lingers there until the relief is as real as any relief actually lived. For the deeper mind does not distinguish between an event lived in the flesh and a scene lived vividly and felt in imagination. Both are recorded as real. Now think of a man fumbling for his card at a crowded register. The cashier sighs. Someone mutters behind him, and he walks out feeling small. If he carries that feeling home untouched, it colors his whole evening. But before sleep, he returns to that counter in imagination, sees his card work smoothly, feels the cashier's easy patience, feels his own unhurried confidence, while the line waits without complaint. He need not have been a different man that afternoon. He only needs to be the author of the version he now carries forward, for it is the carried version, not the original, that becomes the seed. Notice, revision never denies that something happened. It concerns the feeling the fact is allowed to leave behind. Two people can live the same afternoon and go to bed carrying two entirely different inner records. One unrevised and planted as tomorrow's seed, the other corrected and felt as real. The outer day was identical, the inner harvest will not be. Picture your evenings, then, as an editor's desk. The day's pages are laid before you exactly as written, and you, the imagination behind it all, have every right to strike the paragraph that does not belong and pencil in the one that does, a message unanswered that left you assuming you were forgotten. Revise it. See a warm reply arriving, a payment that felt short. Revise it. See the account settled and easy, a cold glance from someone you love. Revise it. See the same eyes meeting yours with tenderness, an old wound reopened in a phone call. Revise it. Hear the conversation carried in patience. Sit with each corrected version, unhurried, until it feels every bit as real as the original. For whichever version you dwell in with feeling stands as fact in the deeper mind. Some nights there will be several such moments. Do not be discouraged. Even a sculptor working late steps back each evening, notices where the clay fell wrong that day, and smooths it before calling the work finished. He neither abandons the piece nor pretends the rough edge was never there. This is exactly your task. And let no moment feel too small for the desk. A sharp word to a child left unrevised, an impatient sigh at a slow driver, a private thought of not enough at the register. These small, unrevised moments accumulate quietly, the way small deposits accumulate in an account nobody is watching, until the sum of them stands where you least expected it. So each night during these 72 hours, before you speak your 4 words, walk back through the day, find where it argued against "I am rich now," And there, in quiet privacy, correct it, feel it differently. Let the corrected version stand as though it were the only one that occurred, and only then speak your words into the stillness that follows. For now they confirm a day already brought into agreement with them, rather than fighting an untouched wound. So speak this decree with me. I revise the day and let the new day stand. I revise the day and let the new day stand. The eighth key is this. You must remember always that you are not your state. You only ever move through states the way light moves through different rooms of a house. And the light itself is never changed by the room it happens to be passing through in that moment. Neville Goddard loved the story of Joseph, a young man thrown into a pit by his own brothers, sold into slavery, imprisoned unjustly, and yet the very same man rises to stand beside the throne of Egypt itself. Neville read this not as the biography of a man who lived long ago, but as the psychological drama of every human being who has ever imagined themselves trapped in a pit of lack, of rejection, of poverty, and who forgets, in the darkness of the pit, that the pit is only a state, not an identity. The pit does not define Joseph. Joseph merely passes through it, on his way to the palace that was always his true position in consciousness. And this is exactly your situation tonight. Whatever pit of circumstance you may presently find yourself standing in, whatever debt, whatever disappointment, whatever thin and worried month, none of it is who you are. It is only a room you are passing through. And the moment you stop mistaking the room for your identity, you become free to assume a different room entirely. Think for a moment of a woman who works behind a counter, and every day a certain customer speaks to her sharply, and every night she carries that sharpness home with her as though it were a coat she is now required to wear for the rest of her life. She begins to say to herself, I am the kind of person people are rude to. And notice what has happened there. She has taken a single passing state, one conversation, one difficult hour, and quietly enthroned it as her identity. She has confused the weather for the sky, the room for the house, the costume for the actor wearing it, and once that confusion takes root, she will find, without ever noticing why, that the world keeps sending her more of exactly that same treatment, not because the world is unkind, but because she has been unconsciously renewing the assumption every single night. This is what Neville meant when he warned that most people live asleep inside a state, wandering through its rooms as though there were no door, no hallway, no other room to walk into, when in truth, the door was standing open the entire time. Now think instead of a man who receives the very same sharp treatment from a stranger, and he simply says within himself, that was a state that person is passing through, and I do not have to enter it with them. He lets the moment pass the way a cloud passes across the face of the sun, without imagining for even a second that he has been reduced by it. This is the discipline Neville pointed to again and again, to feel the sting if it comes, but never to sign your name to it, never to say, I am this, when the truth is only this happened, and it is passing. A state is something you can walk into and walk back out of within the very same hour if you simply remember that you hold the doorknob the entire time. This is why Joseph could stand in a pit at the bottom of a dry well, hearing his own brothers debate whether to leave him for dead, and still, in the language of the story, carry within him the seed of a palace. Because the outer room never once persuaded him of a false identity, and years later, when he stood in the prison of a foreign land, falsely accused, forgotten by the very men he had helped, that too was only a room, a corridor he was passing through on his way somewhere else entirely. And Scripture tells us plainly that the very hour came when he was lifted out of that dungeon and placed at the right hand of the throne. And here is the part Neville asked us never to miss. Nothing about Joseph himself needed to change for that reversal to occur. He did not become a different man the day he ascended. He had carried the same unshaken sense of self the entire time, through the pit, through the false accusation, through the years of the prison. What changed was only the room, the state, the outer arrangement of circumstance catching up at last to the identity that had never actually wavered underneath it. So ask yourself tonight, quite honestly, which pit have you been quietly signing your name to? Is it the pit of never having enough? The pit of being overlooked? The pit of always arriving late to your own good? And once you can name it plainly, you can also see it plainly for what it has always been. A room, nothing more. A temporary arrangement of walls that has absolutely no claim on the one who is only passing through. When you say, "I am rich now," you are not lying about your current room. You are correctly identifying your true self as something that has never actually been confined to any room at all. The crown was never lost. It was only ever set down for a while, resting quietly beside the pit, waiting for you to remember where you had left it. So tonight, allow yourself to feel the palace, even while your feet stand in the pit. Feel the crown resting where it belongs, unshaken by whatever the walls around you happen to look like this evening. Let the sharp word, the thin month, the closed door, pass across you the way weather passes across a mountain that does not move for it. This is the discipline of the master psychologist, to know always that the self is never the state. So speak this decree with me. I am rich, though the state of lack now passes. I am rich, though the state of lack now passes. The ninth key is this, and it gathers everything that has come before it into one final image. Neville Goddard often returned to the story of the prodigal son, a young man who takes his inheritance, wastes it in a distant country, and finds himself starving among the swine, feeding on husks meant for animals, until at last, Scripture says, he came to himself. Notice those words carefully. He came to himself, not to a foreign truth, not to some external rescue, but to himself, to the self he had simply forgotten he already was. This is the whole of the psychological drama in a single phrase. The young man did not acquire something new in that far country. He only remembered something old, something that had been true of him the entire time he was starving among the pigs. He was always a son. Even while he ate husks, he was always heir to his father's house. Even while he told himself he was a beggar with no way home, the tragedy was never his poverty, the tragedy was his forgetting. And Neville taught that this is precisely the condition of anyone who has assumed lack for so long that they no longer remember the richer self was there underneath it the entire time. So let me give you a picture of this from an ordinary evening. Imagine a man who once, years ago, felt entirely at ease with money. He does not remember exactly when the feeling left him, only that somewhere along the way, he began speaking of himself as someone who struggles, someone for whom things are always a little tight, someone who apologizes quietly before he even orders at a restaurant. He has been feeding on the husks of that story for so long that he assumes it is simply his nature. And then one evening, sitting quietly, something in him remembers a different feeling, a feeling from long before the struggle began, an old ease, an old confidence, that money was never really the difficulty. And in that remembering, he does exactly what the prodigal son did in the parable. He comes to himself. He does not read a new book. He does not learn a new fact. He simply recovers an old and true identity that circumstance had buried, but never actually erased. This is what is happening in you tonight. When you speak your 4 words, you are not manufacturing a fantasy out of nothing. You are remembering a truth about the I am within you that was there before the lean seasons, before the worry, before the husks. And Neville was careful to point out that the son does not decide to become a son. He already is one. What changes is only his own recognition of it. And once he turns, Scripture says the Father sees him while he is still a long way off. Notice this detail closely. The Father is not waiting for the Son to arrive fully cleaned up and provisioned and worthy. The Father is watching while the Son is still ragged, still smelling of the pig pen, still a long way off on the road. And yet the Father runs, This is the picture of how swiftly your own deeper self responds the instant you simply turn your assumption around. You do not need to first prove your richness through outward circumstance before the response begins. The response begins the moment the inward turning happens, while you are still a long way off from any visible evidence. The robe is already being called for, the ring already being chosen, the calf already being prepared. And there is another figure in this story worth naming honestly, the elder brother, who stands outside the feast and refuses to come in, complaining that he has served faithfully all these years and never once been given so much as a young goat to celebrate with his friends. Neville read this brother as the reasoning mind, the part of you that keeps careful score of struggle and merit, the part that says, surely such swift restoration cannot be deserved, surely there must be more labor first, more evidence first, more proof first. And this voice will very likely visit you sometime during these 72 hours, quietly listing all the reasons your assumption has not yet been earned. And your task is simply to recognize that voice for what it is, and not to stand outside the feast arguing with it, but to walk past it and take your place at the table anyway, because the Father's welcome was never about merit in the first place. It was only ever about the Son coming home. So tonight, when you lie down and speak your 4 words twice, understand you are not begging a distant power for mercy, and you are not proving yourself worthy through some careful accounting of good behavior. You are simply coming to yourself, walking back toward the home you never actually left, except in your own forgetting. The husks were never your true food. The pit was never your true address. The struggle was never your true name. You were always the one for whom the robe and the ring and the feast were already prepared, and the 72 hours ahead of you are simply the road home, walked in full confidence that the Father is already watching, already running, already calling for the feast to begin before your feet have even reached the door. So speak this decree with me. I return home now, and the feast begins tonight. I return home now, and the feast begins tonight. Here is the whole picture. The I am within you is the very name and power of God, and feeling is what gives your words their flesh. The world around you is only your own state pushed outward and reflected back. So you learn to live already, in the end you desire, rather than in the lack you currently see. You speak your assumption in the soft, drowsy hush before sleep, where the deeper mind receives without argument. You persist without digging up the seed. You revise any day that speaks against you. You remember always that you are not the pit you may be standing in, but the one who was always destined for the palace. And you come to yourself, as the Son once did, discovering that the feast was already being prepared the moment you turned toward home. If what you have felt tonight has stirred something quiet and true in you, and you would like to build this into a daily practice, a steady way of living in the end, every single day, rather than only on the nights you remember, I invite you to join the 21-day reality shift, a guided path where each day carries you deeper into the feeling of the wish fulfilled, until living in the end is no longer something you reach for occasionally, but simply becomes the natural atmosphere of your own consciousness. It is there for you whenever you feel ready to take that next step. So say it with me one final time tonight. I am rich now. I am the one who lives in the end. Imagination creates my reality. And so, tonight, say your 4 words twice. I am rich now. I am rich now. And then simply rest and simply watch as the next 72 hours quietly rearrange themselves around the state you dared tonight to assume,